everyone is doing. It's easy to get lost in a sea of comparison, secret tricks, and promises of overnight success. The long game? That's my approach to business. You gotta show up, you gotta do the work, and there are no quick fixes for long-term success. It takes creativity, it takes strategy, and it takes listening to the voice inside you. I'm a web designer, digital strategist, and energetic thinker, bringing you real-world business building experiences, conversations with creators who are out there doing it now, and ideas to spark the energy in your own business. And along the way, we're gonna have a little bit of fun as well. So thanks for being here, and let's get to today's episode. When you are creating a body of work like a podcast, as you move forward, themes start to develop. Now that I am 2 years in and over 100 episodes in with this creative endeavor, I am seeing some patterns and ideas come forward. You know, the concept of the long game is that you gotta stick with it and that you are on your own journey. And with that, things evolve in their own time, and they evolve completely unique to you in your own way, right? No two people have the same path. And we talk a lot about creativity here. You know, it's something that drives me, and it's part of my core values. It's a way to view the world and a way to approach your work. This podcast has really become an intersection of creativity, business, and strategy. Oh, yes, and fun. Like, let's have some freaking fun along the way. So, of course. But the more I reflect and see how much we talk about creativity here, you know, it's coming to light, right? The power of creativity in letting who you are show more to the outside world. The power of creativity as a release. The power of creativity for healing. The power of creativity for your happiness. Well, today, my guest, Lizzie LaRock, joins me for some supercharged creative talk. Seriously, just listening to her worldview and references fuels me with ideas. Lizzie LaRock is a creativity coach, speaker, and creator of the popular and in the wild program, The Life Feast. This membership is a lively mashup of positive psychology and creativity, where she helps people find their spark, achieve goals, get out of their own way, and find more joy, all while making it feel like a playful adventure. And, you know, this is really such an expressive episode that really made me think, you know, gave me pause afterward. And who just doesn't love being inspired? So listen in. Today, the long game is The Life Feast with Lizzie LaRock. I am so excited for our talk today. We are getting creative. We are talking creativity, what it does for your soul, how it can fuel you, why you need it in your life, with my guest, creativity coach, speaker, and creator of the popular online and in the wild program, The Life Feast. With me today is Lizzie LaRock. Welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, me too. And we are old friends, so we were just chatting it up. Of course, I always say, gosh, I should have pushed record like 5 minutes ago.
I know, get all the dirt in there.
Totally. I'm so excited to connect with you, though, and talk about what you've been doing and your passion and how to help people bring their passion out a little bit more. So let's get started. Life Feast, first of all, that's the name of your business. That's the name of your membership. Best name ever. And I have heard a lot of membership names. Tell us, what is it? How does that even manifest?
Yeah, so the name, that's really funny. I actually have, your audience will appreciate this. I have a Facebook ads person right now who does not like the name and thinks it needs to be very literal and very much like the 5 steps to your whatever. And I was like, no, it's The Life Feast. Yeah. And it's saying that forever. I will.
Oh my gosh. That. You're like, you don't understand me.
I totally. I was like, yeah, this is a mismatch. So, but that's a story for a different day. But totally. So it comes from a Derek Walcott poem. And it's this beautiful poem. So years ago, probably 12 years ago or so, I was I mean, this is going to sound even more antiquated. I was reading a magazine. I was reading Oprah magazine, and in one of the center spreads, she would have a poem each month, and there was a poem from Derek Walcott called "Love After Love," and it was this beautiful, kind of like a self-care poem, and it was about this relationship with yourself, and it's this peel your own image from the mirror, that's been kind of I'm not going to say recite the entire poem, but sort of this premise of being undernourished your own self. And it was sit with yourself and feast on your life. And I just loved that concept. I think I burst into tears at the time. I owned like a 300-seat restaurant. So irony, all the food metaphors. It was so stressful. It was the bane of my existence. I had I have twins who are now 16 years old. So I had little kids, a huge restaurant, and was just going through really difficult times in my life. And I read this poem like, I've been starving. Like, I have not fed my soul. I have not fed my well-being at all. And here this poem is talking about feasting on your life and no longer sort of starving yourself in your own well-being. So years later, when I was creating the Life Feast, I was like, that is the name. It's coming from that poem.
Oh my gosh. It is perfect. It's beautiful. It's celebratory. It's joyous. It's everything that you bring to your work. And we're going to talk about today is the Life Feast. I mean, that's what it is, really. Like how to get yourself out of your everyday, how to get your thinking out of your everyday.
Yeah. I'd like to say
about like this creative mashup of things.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say, I joke that, we aren't meant to just pay bills and die in life. Like, we're meant to have this feast. We are meant to, and I think that with adulthood, the other sort of impetus of the origin of the Life Feast is this Picasso quote that I love. And that it's, he says that the purpose of art is to wash the dust of daily life off of our souls. And I think of it as like, so with each sort of adult milestone, each mortgage payment, each, getting a house, all that, you just get more dusty, right? Like, we're just coming out of tax season, and it just felt like a really,
oh my gosh, that does a number on me emotionally.
See?
Even though I'm like, nothing's wrong, I'm doing nothing wrong,
right? State of panic. So
I know.
we just get more and more, kind of stagnant in that piece. And so I wanted to create a program that got people in this, like, I like to say, like, out of your inbox and into your life. Like, how can you use creativity to live a bigger life when culturally we're just inundated with be productive, get stuff done, do, a million things for your kids and work. Find
time for yourself in there. Don't forget that. Squeeze it in.
Yeah, exactly. And so my realization in my own work was that, and it was a couple things. There's an origin sort of before the Life Feast came about, where I'll talk about how I use creativity to help me, but I'll just share that, I've found that, so because I have identical twins, like every milestone happens at the same time. So it's not dragged out. Like, when everyone went to school, everyone went to school. And so I kind of came to this moment when they were about 8 years old, and I was taking them to painting classes and dance classes and sports and piano. And one of my twins was quitting piano. And she loved to draw. She wanted to take flute lessons. But I was really bummed that she was quitting piano. And I had to, as I was trained as a coach. So as a coach, like, you kind of look at yourself and go, wait, what is this about? Like, why am I so bummed that she wants to quit? And it was like, well, this is this big regret of mine. And I'm not doing all these things. Like, I'm taking them to all these activities, and I'm so envious of like their schedule. And I'm the driver, and I'm just sitting in my car, on my phone, checking my email and doing work things in every waking moment when I'm not parenting. So it was this realization of, so I signed up for the piano lessons and I
Awesome.
told the piano teacher, I said, well, I don't want to take lessons away from small children if you have a long waiting list or something. Cause he was like, you don't have to, like, you don't have to feel guilty, Lizzie. And I was like, no, it's like, it's a big regret. And I really would love that. So it was just making space in my own life for this, what I call feastiness. And I'll say,
you're so right. You're so right though, you're so right that we have made an effort to do these things for our children, expose them to different activities and different arts, yet we stop that for ourselves. Or maybe it's like every couple of weeks I go out with my girlfriends, there's my one thing, or,
Yeah, exactly. So we role model for our kids. Hey, it's really important to have all these enrichment activities, and you should be so well-rounded and do all these. My kids were very overscheduled. I'm like the liberal arts parent of, that let's do everything because it sounded so amazing to me. And then say and then when you become adult, you do nothing. You pay bills, you make dinner, and maybe every once in a while you get to go do a girls' night out, and that's it. So, and I thought, that's just wrong. And I realized too, I would be standing at the park or the playground with my friends, and we're just talking about what summer camp are they doing and what tutor do you go to and all the stuff. And I thought we were interesting people. We used to have cool things to talk about. How is this now, and I love my children and I love my friends, and we learn so much from each other in collaborating and sharing that information. But I also was like, enough. We need to spice things up, ladies.
Oh my gosh, completely. The conversations for me were school. What school are you going to? Where are you going? What all that? And I literally moved because I was like, I don't want to have those conversations. I don't want to seek out the school anymore. We're going to move where the kids will just go to school and that's it.
Yeah, the stress of where are they going to go to college and they're 4 years old, and you're like, okay.
And I was like, we talked about, I was like, we used to just get together and hang out and crack up. And now we're like, where are you going to school?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's really funny. I told a photography mentor of mine, and I spoke a couple months ago, and she's in her 70s. And she was saying, that she loved the work that I did. And she was saying how her daughter-in-law really probably needed this because she, just like us, had little kids and was so focused on that and career, and that was it. And I told her, I said, when I took my first, when I came back to photography after kind of a hiatus from college to adulthood, when I took it, I didn't tell any friends. I was actually a little bit embarrassed that I was wanting to take photography classes and a creative writing class and things like that, of just, I'm going to feel like the bad mom, or I'm going to feel like I'm so indulgent of, these silly little things. So I kept it very, very quiet the first few that I took. So, and she was, my mentor, she had said, I didn't feel bad at all. When my kids were little, growing up, you and I are the same age, in the 70s and 80s, you're like, yeah, my mom was not hyper focused on all these things that, that I was as a mom. So
Totally. And, it's funny because I share some of that where people will be talking about, what's pop culture shows that are on. And I'm like, I feel like I sound so elitist being like, I don't watch that. I watch two things and then I'm on the internet or doing something else that's of interest to me that isn't watching those shows that everybody's watching. And I'm like, when people get together and they talk about that, I'm like, I love pop culture, but I have no idea what you're talking about right now because I am over here on this other thing doing this. And that is so freaking cool to me,
I love that, Sandra, because you are a creator. And I like to say that, so our culture today, really emphasizes consumption over creativity, and with just consuming social media or consuming Netflix. And I was like, I'm not a Luddite. I like my Instagram. I do like I still have a Netflix subscription,
Yeah,
but it's
totally.
just this balance of like, how can we say, oh, if I'm having actual junk food, like a Hostess cupcake versus digital junk food versus creating like my output, like what do I want to put out rather than just constantly take in. So I love that, you're the same
And
way.
I think it's
I'm
the
not caught up on
concept.
any shows either.
Yeah, it's
So
the concept of the lifelong learner in a way too. Like I am s- taking these courses or doing things that are of interest that are fueling my brain and my creativity in a different way. And it doesn't make me any better. It's just like that's what I like, like I like that. I like talking about that stuff.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
Um,
I would argue maybe it doesn't make you better, but there are so many positive benefits to getting out of that just total consumption mode and being in the creativity mode.
Totally, totally. I mean, that is something that we do for ourselves too. Like my husband will say, like, oh, like, he still thinks like, watching a show together is quality time together too. And I'm like, I get that because we laugh or we share or whatever. But I'm like, oh, this is something else that I'm going to apply to what I do because I also think like my work is very creative. So I like
Yeah.
to like the people who come and work with me are drawn to me because of my ideas, right? So if I expose myself to more things, I'm like, ooh, firing at all these different pistons are firing, and it
Yes.
helps me bring it to what I do, which I get really energized about.
Yes, I love that. Sort of, you know, it's that concept that I joke that like do it for the gram, where
Yeah,
you don't jump off of cliffs and things just to take an Instagram photo, but you're like it does give you, a little more impetus to be adventurous when you're, thinking how do I want to fuel ideas and things in my life? Like I want to have more experiences. I want to get off. I always say like I don't want to just make a dent in the couch cushions. Like I want to make a dent in the universe. Like I want to get off the
yeah,
sidelines, get into to life. I also want to rest and like, yeah, watch a show with my husband, but also do things, have that feasty life as I would describe it, that bigger, bolder response rather than just, oh, okay, I'm just kind of zoned out and consuming.
totally. And so you're using iPhone photography as the vehicle now. And it's something that's accessible to all of us, right? We all have the phone at our hip. And the cameras are really good in there. You don't need the big DSLR and everything. I mean, you could have that. That's great too. But like you can really do and for yourself and dive into your life and what you're talking about with an iPhone.
Yeah, and so I like to joke that the iPhone is like the gateway drug to creativity because it's already with us and it takes amazing pictures. Now it has so many functionalities that are similar to a DSLR with changing the
Totally.
f-stop and making the background blurrier and so many apps and amazing things. Like it's funny, I have my DSLR sitting right here next to me, and I use my iPhone a million times more than I care because it's heavy. It's not with me all the
Oh, it's bulky. You can't have it in a cute little bag. Yeah.
exactly. So the phone is what I primarily create with, but I also love it because I feel like when people have been so I believe that creativity is a state, not a trait. It's a muscle that we build and that we all have it, and that it ends up getting culturally educated, squeezed out of us in some way, shape, or form. And so for those people who are really drawn to my work and coming back to this, to bringing creativity into their life, that when you are a busy parent and working and doing all the things, you can't just like bust out the paint set on the side of the road and have this large swath of time for this creative experience. Your time is limited. So what I realized was in my own practice, like I would be waiting. My daughter, one of my twins, is a dancer and she takes a million dance classes. And I was always waiting outside of the dance studio or in the lobby and watching that, as I said, we're all just on our phones, waiting, checking email and kind of doing nonstop work. And I thought, what if I just went for a photo walk? Like, what if I just went and walked around outside for 15 minutes and took pictures of shadows or whatever I saw? And so I was doing that when they were little, when I guess when the first iPhone came out. I mean, I was an early adopter, so I think my kids were maybe 5 or so. But that's what I was doing. And I thought, oh, this is how I can still have this. I don't need a dark room. I don't need all these
Oh my
things that are
gosh.
that I don't need to be on a week-long retreat or to do this. I can bring it into my daily life and get all the benefits, the health benefits of creativity and the joyful and the life benefits without taking up a ton of time. And we're all taking pictures anyway. If you look at your phone and you have 35,000 photos on it of your family
gosh,
and your
totally.
dog and a sunset, you know what I'm talking about. We're all doing it anyway.
And the whole idea of the photo walk too, it's a process. It is something that gets you out of your everyday, because you're not, you're going with a goal to look and to see things, not just to power walk and blaze through as quick as you can. Like, the idea is to observe, to walk around and look at the nooks and crannies, or the flower growing out of the crack in the sidewalk, and appreciating these pieces that you discover along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, you'll appreciate this, Sandra. I'm sure you were familiar with this, having your BFA in photography back in the, 90s, but as I did.
Totally.
So when we learned on a 35 millimeter camera and you were in the dark room, it took so long to develop a roll of film. You had to shoot the whole thing at once, so that when you then go into the dark room and develop the film and then develop the photos, that it was worth your time. So I would be out. I remember I started taking photography when I was 15 years old and was in a photography class in my high school. And I would just go out with the 35 millimeter camera and I would take the 24 roll of film or however many it was and do the whole thing. So you were forced to, and I grew up I live in Colorado now, which is a very scenic place, but I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan. So it was like you were having to find shadows and interesting things that weren't necessarily the definition of beauty of, Ansel Adams' version of a landscape. And so I didn't realize, it's been a practice with me since I was about 15 years old. I named it more during the quarantine, during the original COVID lockdown, when we were all inside our homes. And I was, going a little crazy at times and thinking where we live a little bit out in the country, and I've never seen so many of my neighbors in my life walking. Like, we're all out walking. And I thought, oh, I should teach people the photo walk, because it's a really beautiful thing to do during an extremely difficult time that we're all going through, to see the world, see the good in the world, see what other things are going on, instead of just, obviously there's plenty of stress relieving benefits just to walking or being outside, but to add in this creative element to get us kind of out of our head and into our heart a little bit more, into presence and into flow state. And it's interesting. There's more recently, there's been a study of the original lockdown, that we all went through, of over 5,000 people, of showing that those who had creative practices that got them into a flow state, and let's say it was like the sourdough bread starter or whatever.
Totally.
That was not flow state for me. That seemed very stressful. But if you had practices that the people were remarkably happier, able to deal with the uncertainty, less depressed, less lonely, and less anxious than counterparts, even mindfulness counterparts of people who had a great mindfulness practice. Those mindful people did better than those who had nothing. But the flow state people, those in the creative practices, fared the best in an over 5,000 person study. So I didn't know that information when I created.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So I didn't know that information when I created the photo walk guide. I just thought, like, this is one of the things that I'm doing to stay sane and leave my four walls and not just go for a walk, you know, to also create something and put myself in that better frame of mind.
Right. And for the listeners, one of the things that you do in your photo guide of the photo walk and the guide that you've created is that you give these prompts. So, because I'm sure people are like, okay, well, how do you start? What do you do? You're just out there. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's the road, it's a tree. No, but you really give some photographic and creative prompts so that people aren't stuck. Because, when you're starting an endeavor like this, like, we all are familiar with like the blank page thing, right?
Yeah,
like
the bitch of the blank canvas.
and you can't write. Yeah, the blank canvas, the blank page, you can't write, you can't paint. What do I do on it? Kind of thing. So your prompts that you give really help people to get started and to get into action, and like that becomes like this kinetic energy that starts to feed one step off of another. Things like a worm's eye view or shooting from the hip, which are very common and familiar standard photo practices. Worm's eye view is getting down low, or shooting from the hip is like really just walking through the town there and getting what you get. So let's talk a little bit about some of the prompts that you do and, how even some of the responses that you've gotten to the prompts.
Yeah, it's funny. My husband thinks the worm's eye view, he was not a photographer ever, so he didn't know that that's like actually a term in photography, but he thinks it's
like, that's a real one. I will say your Dunkin' Donut life is a made up term, but
that is. I have some made up words. I have the slow toe too. That's my made up poetry. For the listeners, I gave Sandra this lexicon that we use in the Life Feast of all one of my students had said, like, please put it together of like all your crazy words, Lizzie, because you have so many. But the prompts, so the worm's eye view, my husband thinks is so funny. Like, he's always like, aren't you going to worm crawl today? Or, and he has this vision. Yeah, he's always like, you're going to be in the old folks' home with, playing shuffleboard and showing everyone how to worm crawl around with their walkers. That's what he always says. But, I had one woman actually, so she ended up becoming a member of the Life Feast. The Photo Walk Guide is a free download. But this woman had downloaded it, and she wrote me an email, and she said, oh my gosh, I had never tried, I've never heard of this in my life. She said, my husband was struggling with some depression, as was I. She was a teacher, and so she was switching to online teaching, in the pandemic, so stressed about that, her own kids, then her students. And she said, we downloaded the Photo Walk Guide. I took my husband out. We were at the park. I'm like down in the grass, doing worm's eye view. He's thinking I'm absolutely nuts. And she said, and then we looked at the photos and they were so freaking amazing. And we loved them so much. She was like, basically like worm's eye view changed my whole quarantine and made us so much happier. And I was like, that's like the best news I've ever heard. It was so I love that. But like in the Life Feast, we'll do something as simple as just like right now we're doing different colors. So I'm like, hey, if you see blue today, go take a photo of whatever you see as blue. And that's a mindfulness awareness building practice. That's a way of, if we're just walking around in life, reading our texts as we're walking down the street, instead saying like, hey, open your eyes. Like, we were on the color, this is outing myself, but we were on the color red like a month ago, and I was walking to my office and noticed that there's a fire hydrant near my office. I was like, in a few years I've been here, I don't think I've ever noticed that there was a fire hydrant. Right. Until I'm looking for red. And so I like to say to them, like, it's an invitation. So you can take a literal photo of a fire hydrant and you might just be like, what the heck is the point of that, Lizzie? Why do I want a photo of a fire hydrant? But I say, like, but it's an invitation to get in closer and get abstract, and to do the bird's eye view or the worm's eye view or shoot from the hip or try these other things out. And then you come away. So my experience was, I get out of my car, I notice this fire hydrant, I take sort of a lame picture of just a literal fire hydrant. And then I walk in closer and take these other angles of it. And then I'm like, oh my God, I love my photo of this fire hydrant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how those prompts help. They help you to see, they help you be more aware and more present and get into that flow state, even for just 2 minutes. Like, it didn't take me very long as I'm standing on the street having a photo session with the fire hydrant.
Right, totally.
And you learn how to create in that moment on the fly, which helps you deal with uncertainty better, or builds confidence, or boosts inflammation. Like, these are all the creative benefits to just something silly like taking a picture of the color red.
And I love that story because it shows what can happen in the span of 5 minutes. Like, you didn't have to be like, I'm going to a class and I'm registered. I have to leave 15 minutes early and drive and park and then do the stuff, be in the mindset. Like, you had this experience and it was integrated into your life, right? Like, as you were going to the office, you know, and then
it made my day better. Like, I mean, I then was like, oh, I didn't just rush in the door.
You're like, I'm the shit. Look at my
look at what I made. I'm so psyched. And then you get to share it to Instagram, and then you know that, and it just, I think there's that piece too of like reclaiming our identity in our 40, like over 40, with creativity of like, no, I do have something to express. I'm more than just these roles that I've put myself in, and it doesn't have to take long. It doesn't have to be this big stressful thing that, you know, signing up for the class, taking the class, worrying about the class.
Totally. And making an effort to do it. Like, that's what I really love about this, is that it becomes part of it. And you know, we've seen different like versions of this where you do the 30-day photo challenge kind of thing, and that's cool, but this is like an ongoing piece. This is a, you know, something that you can integrate in and see what others are producing and get ideas, and then try something out on your own the next time after the next prompt.
And we inspire each other. So within the Life Feast, like that private group where people are sharing their different photos of what they took, like, it's you know, one of our mutual friends, and Katie Martin, had said, like, it's like the best place on the internet. Like, I just love going in there and seeing these photos that everyone's taken of their life, these feasty photos, because they're not traditional photos. They're really unique in this way, and they're designed to get you to be more curious and get you out of your comfort zone and get you to be more playful and more adventurous. And then that translates into actions that you're taking in your life as well. You know, it's not just limited to the fire hydrant photo or whatever the photo is of the day.
And I want to ask you, because while we're on some of the prompt discussion, some of your prompts, like a number of those concepts in the Life Feast, are very Eastern influenced. So there's things like the Mixang photography, which is Tibetan for good eye, and it's as you write, a contemplative photography practice in which the heart, eye, and mind are all synchronized. Or komorebi, which is the sun filtering through the trees, and that's a Japanese term. And so I would love to just hear how these influences come about for you as well, because they are quite beautiful and Zen in some ways.
Well. I'm telling Sandra before we hit record, I'm obsessed with the culture of Japan and the language, and the fact that they have a word, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but if I'm not, I apologize for butchering a beautiful culture and language. But komorebi, and it means the interplay of light and leaves. And I just think, wow, any place that actually took the time to name the interplay of light and leaves is just, I'm just in awe of that language. So I guess the origin of it, so I was an English major and a photography minor in college. I'm a writer. I love words. So I love all kinds of words. And we have a whole module in the Life Feast on poetry, where we're making photos and little words and things like that. So that's where this lexicon came from. I'm trying to think, like, what was the first one? Probably Mixang. So when maybe about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, possibly longer. My first ever therapist was also a practicing Buddhist, and she had told me about a Buddhist talk in our town from these two photographers, and they weren't teaching Miksang, or they were doing like a presentation at the library on just a contemplative photography practice. And they had a book called, Contemplative Photography. And I went to the talk and I thought, oh my God, this is what I do. I had no idea. I never had named it that way. I didn't. Yes. And I was like, this is because their whole premise, it wasn't any sort of photography, right, can be contemplative. There are people who do wildlife and are sitting waiting for an animal to show up. I'm not like that. Like, I love to sort of commune with the moment that you're there and notice this beautiful shadow or streak of sunlight or whatever's happening in that moment. I'm not a great planner. And so their whole contemplative practice was that same thing of like a unique photo of a stoplight or of, just mundane things that you wouldn't have deemed as art. So I was already doing this. I had no name for it. They had this book on contemplative photography. And I think somewhere inside the book, they mentioned Miksang photography. And then I Googled it, and there was like another book I could buy on Miksang. And I loved that it translates as, yes, and it translates as the good eye, and I put that in
down the rabbit
because
hole,
it's not.
Right?
I don't like people to get caught up in you have to have a good eye or talent. That's a very we go with the growth mindset in the Life Feast, so that you can learn these things in practice. I say, like, nobody, not even Ansel Adams, came out of the womb knowing what an f-stop was. Like that photography is the ultimate sort of like growth, creativity. You have to learn the mechanics of it. So I don't believe there is that you're just born with a good eye. You develop it. And so I loved that name for it. Then I think the next one that came in was Wabi Sabi, which
True.
How did I find it? I think it was just maybe that same therapist, I can't remember, or a book that I'd read. And Wabi Sabi is this concept of perfectly imperfect, of things being if you take like a mug and you say, oh, this was like a Walmart mug manufactured in a factory. This is not a Walmart mug. This is my Mr. T mug. It has like dents and cracks in it, but it's like that it's not perfect, and it's perfectly imperfect. It's not perfect in spite of its imperfections. It's beautiful because of its imperfections. And that's the concept of Wabi Sabi. It comes from this Japanese tea ceremony. There's a whole long story to that I share in the Life Feast, but I just think it's the loveliest thing of how can we embrace our patinas, and especially as we age, of saying like, yeah, I love my imperfections. They're what make me relatable. That's what makes me human. Those are our connection points. Yeah. So, and
oh my gosh, right? And I mean, that's what draws people to you. I mean, Mr. T Mug, right? I'm there with you, girl.
That's the playful side. Like, I'm very playful. So it's like, I try to say, we need to get out of that perfectionism. We put creativity on a pedestal and we get really intimidated by it. And instead, it's like, how can we approach it with a sense of play and curiosity and adventure, so that it's not intimidating.
So let me ask you, when you take, like, inside the membership, like, what's the format of it then? So like, if you're watching some lessons, you're getting these prompts, like, are you meeting weekly? Or where are you posting? Like, how does that all work so that people can support one another and see the creative progression? Because that's part of it, right? Is to kind of say, wow, I saw your first photo and now I'm seeing your creative spark develop more.
So it's a little different. What we do in there is, so there are, I thought it was so funny you'd ask me, like, are they actual modules? Like, yes, they are. So we have, like, I start with the Miksang. I start with the foundation of learning. I call it the art of seeing and the art of awareness. And I talk about this, like, really interesting study. So for me, as you pointed out that I should share with everyone, it is a mashup of positive psychology and iPhone photography. So I am certified in applied positive psychology. I absolutely love the science of positive psychology, and I've been a photographer forever and ever. So I created this mashup because photography is this beautiful way of taking these concepts of positive psychology and taking them from like the information to the transformation. You have to put them into action. So if I'm teaching you mindfulness, you have struggle closing your eyes and like sitting on a cushion and meditating, I say, yeah, it's the other M word. It's the mixong photography, where we learn how to be really present and notice things in that way. So it's a concept. Yes,
And stop thinking about the overthinking that we're doing, because you're focusing on something else. It's the same benefits as the
exactly.
meditative state, because you're not
Exactly,
focused on
exactly.
taxes
So
and da, da, da,
so
da,
that's
because
just
that's
an
out of your
example of,
mind. You're
that's where
focused
we
on
start
being in
with
the
that
flow.
foundation. And within those modules, like they're very playful and fun. Like I throw in a song clip from, David Bowie and Freddie Mercury, like about like a little under pressure for some stress discussions that we have of, watching them strut around on stage and singing it. I have clips from you might be familiar with Casey Neistat, the filmmaker, YouTube, love him. So I've got like a little adventure sequence of a clip from Casey Neistat. I have a Chevy Chase movie clip in there for awe from a funny old movie. I bring in to each module. So I'm teaching you the science. I'm giving you embarrassing stories from my own life. Like in the mindfulness one, I talk about the time I set my oven on fire, and I didn't, with like my kids having a birthday party with 11 little girls in our kitchen and flames like coming out of our oven. So the times when I wasn't mindful. And then I bring in studies that are just so fascinating, but you didn't have to read the academic journal. I'm giving you the snippets of how to apply it to your life without the density of the information, and bringing it in this light, funny, playful way.
Yes,
And then
right.
you're given what I call the life lens. And the life lens is a little downloadable, JPEG PDF that you can put on your phone of your prompts for that module, of what you should be taking photos of a shadow or of a diagonal line, and so you'll appreciate that. Like I give an assignment of take a photo of a diagonal line because of the concept in photography of leading lines in composition. So I like to say it's like the Karate Kid method, where, remember the original Karate Kid, the wax on, wax on, he's washing the car. He has no idea he's learning, karate, and he's getting annoyed. I'm like, that's the same thing. People are like, why am I taking a picture of a diagonal line? And I'm like, just do it. And
Defensive
this
moves.
is why. So then later on, I have a little module that shows some photographic principles like rule of thirds and leading lines and things like that. But first, I'm just giving people the prompt to play with, mixed in with here's why you're doing it positive psychology wise. Then we go into curiosity. We have a whole playful module, adventure, awe, and my favorite, which is you said I can swear on here, the fuck perfectionism bonus, because I know that that's where I get in my own way. I have a very vocal inner critic, getting too perfectionistic about things. And so in that, I have clips from Brene Brown and Elizabeth Gilbert, and I have another Japanese word, this kintsugi word, and things from Ansel Adams. So it's a mashup within the module of all these different ways to inspire people to then apply, like, oh yeah, I do that too. And I get all perfectionistic. And I had like one woman tell me, she said, oh, she really hadn't taken that many photos in the Life Feast, but she was like, I was planning a dinner party and I was getting all perfectionistic and all stressed out about it. And I remembered the feck perfection, which comes from a great James Victory graphic designer, his book. I love the term. And she was like, I remembered feck perfection and thought, no, this doesn't have to be a perfect dinner party. And so it's just funny in that way. That's how it ends up translating to life experiences without necessarily having to be, oh, you need to go take a perfect photo today. Does that answer that?
Totally. It's not a serious, it's about that
Yeah,
process that we keep
exactly. And I'm like,
mentioning.
it's
And
this,
the
it's a
psychology
fun
piece
way
of it
to
all
do
comes
personal
in.
growth of tapping into your own creativity. And then what happens with a lot, there are the people who get really into the photography and love and stick with that. But then there are those who are, oh, I started painting, or oh, I did like I'm big into theater, and I was like, oh, I do a theater group and write comedy, and people, it opens up those channels. That's why I said earlier, like, it's a gateway drug. It opens up the possibility. You can stick with iPhone photography in there, but you can also, as many do, dive into other art forms that feel really exciting.
It's a spark. It sparks your creativity as a whole.
Exactly.
I want to ask you, what what do you do with your photos when you're on this journey, right? Like, I mean, I feel like that's a question we all have because we all have an iPhone library full of things. So, like, is that something you talk about too with your members? Like, is it about sharing it on social media? Is it printing and hanging up like I've got behind me? Or, like our photo libraries can get so overwhelming. So, when you're taking these photos where it might be something for yourself, um, are you keeping that fire hydrant for the next 5 years, right, on your phone?
Yeah. So, well, it's a beautiful question, because what you tap into is, within positive psychology, there is this concept of savoring. And savoring is this piece. So I'll backtrack just a tiny bit. We say in positive psychology, we have a strong negativity bias for our survival. And you've probably heard this before of, when we were looking for tigers and lions and trying to eat lunch and not be someone's lunch, that we were hyper focused on what's wrong in life, and that is sort of maladaptive to the way we live today, but it's still within our wiring. And so what researcher like Barbara Fredrickson says is that we need 3 positives for every negative in our day, and that we are Teflon for what's good in life and Velcro for what's not great. So we remember what's not great very easily, and what's good kind of just slides right off of us. So this practice that is a part of positive psychology is called savoring, and it is to hold a moment longer in your heart that was good, so that you remember it. If you think about like savoring a meal or a bite, if we go with all the food metaphors. So photography, I was like, photography is built for savoring. Like, it's, being able to print photos, to hold on to that moment, to revisit it, the nostalgia, all the things that come up with it. It's already that way. So there are a couple things. I have done art shows here in Steamboat, where I live, with both the out of town Life Feasters and the local ones. The local ones is pretty funny because
So cool.
I hung up all their photos. This was pre-COVID, and their kids came. I was like, yeah, your kids coming to your art show. We'll be going to. We were all going to like a dance recital the next week. I'm like, we're on the dance recital.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, right, the elementary and the
Yes,
lunchroom
yeah, but
setup.
you're gonna come see this mom's art show. So we've done that. During COVID, I did a digital art show, and that was really fun. We had like little Zoom chat rooms and people coming in. I called it, we have something called the ceiling selfie in the Life Feast, where I get people to take we hold our phones to take photos of your ceiling. And I called it, like, if you're climbing the walls, you may as well take a ceiling selfie. So we did an art show of that. We also, I show them different ways to do photo books. And then as you can see behind me, I print all of my photos in these squares. They're sort of like your live Instagram feed. And I encourage them, to do it as well. And so people they get inspired by each other then I put them up in my office, or I put them up in my house. And they're, not, one woman said, it never occurred to me to take a photo of anything other than my children and to hang it up. And she takes the most incredibly awesome, cool photos. And I'm like, well, I'm glad it finally occurred to you that would be a good thing. So we use that savoring practice to, get the photos off of the phone and into real life. if we are sharing them on social media, I'm careful to say like we want to do it for the joy of sharing, not the perfectionism, not get caught up in that sense. Yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, totally. And I love that because I am, with my creativity, when I go on vacation or even do these books for my kids, when I make a photo book, like I'm incorporating not only the family photos and the kids' photos, but the tree, the special look at the diagonal on the wall or all of those things. So like I'm putting that in there as well from our family trips and all of those type of things so that like my kids will see when they're looking through, they see what I'm seeing, as I'm taking it. And it becomes a form of my creativity, not just a document of our vacation,
I, yeah,
so
yeah,
that's why I like to ask that, like, how are people using that? I'm very much a visual person in terms of my photos being used. And I'll even, when there's a sale at one of the online places, I will literally just be like, upload 100 photos and get them printed and put a
yes,
stack out, and my kids love looking through them and being like, here we are, because they're not precious anymore in that way. Like when we were kids, photos were so precious. They were under the plastic and in there, and there was one of them. I mean, I was just looking through an album recently where my puppy had gotten to it, and I'm like, well, those photos are chewed, but there's only one. Like
yeah.
there's no negative. There's, but now it's like they're less precious. So like I literally put a stack on the shelf and the kids will take it down sometimes and just flip through 100 photos.
Yeah, I love that. And I've used them as stationery of like, well, maybe I'll make them into like a thank you note or something or a gift card
So cool.
or any
Yeah.
number of things. I use this company called Parabo that I love, and the same thing. Like they print like 25 at a time, and you get this packet of the squares, and it's like, yeah, photos for everyone. Let's enjoy them. They die in that digital library. I have experts come into the Life Feast often, and I had this wonderful woman, Isabel Dervaux, come in, and she is a photo curator, and she helps curate libraries, and she has a very strong art background. She was in New Yorker magazine. She worked for Vogue for a while in illustration. So she has this beautiful way of organizing photos and curating and making them, because she was like, listen, you go into just even going into your iPhone photo app, it's so overwhelming and you don't see the one, she was like, delete delete the receipts that you don't need anymore. Delete the parking space that you took a photo of to remember where you parked and you don't need anymore. So that when you are scrolling through, you're seeing the ones that, that you want to savor, not the parking.
Totally. And as I dump them off into a separate drive, there's always ones I keep. I have ones at the very top that are so much older that I'm like, I'm not deleting these from my library because those are the ones I savor and I like to go back to and look at. So it'll be, they're kind of broken down by years, but there's still like a couple years at the top that are just creative for me to savor and reminisce.
Exactly. And I guess the other thing that I do that I think that the Life Feast members really appreciate is, so like, let's say for the example, we just finished the color blue and everyone had, all their different takes on it. And then I create like a collage of them all or a slideshow or a reel or something. And then they say, oh my God, cool. Like their little lone fire hydrant or whatever the blue was by itself sort of didn't have the same impact as seeing this whole cohesive group of them, and that it comes together in this other artful way, joined up together.
And I've seen that on your Instagram. We will link to that so people can check out like the work that people are doing as well.
Yeah, I savor those. I'm like, I love it when you share your random crack in the sidewalk with me.
Right, totally. Well, this has been amazing. I mean, this has been such a great, exciting, feasty feastful talk. I want to thank you so much for coming and joining me today, and just for like inspiring us to get back into and start reclaiming some of that, because I really do feel like so many people are on the coming out of the pandemic, and like we still have effects from that. And like people need to not only go out to be with other people, but to like reclaim some of their life and their happiness. So this has been, so inspiring, and I'm really excited to share it with everyone. Thank you so much,
Thank
Lizzie.
you, Sandra. I am so thrilled to be here, and yeah, this was such a joy to be interviewed by someone who loves photography as much as I do too. So I
mean, we can
appreciate
keep
it.
going, right? And we're going to have links where you can find Lizzie, where you can sign up for the Life Feast, where you can check her out on Instagram. All of that will be in the show notes, everybody. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me today. You can access more information, links mentioned in this episode, and the show notes at thelonggamepodcast.net. If today's show connected with you in some way, please share it with your friends or hop on and leave a review. Both of these make a really big difference. All right, until next time, keep playing the long game.